The Shibuya Incident arc is home to many different levels of power, and today we will be taking a look at a few of the grade 1 level fighters that reside in this arc. Kento Nanami and Megumi Fushiguro will experience and attack powered lead Nanami to victory in this match, or will Megumi's intellect, hacks, and potential give him a way to deal with the 7-3 sorcerer? In this video, me and Noop will be taking a look at both of these characters' Shibuya showings in order to determine who would win and why. So to start off, let's take a look at Nanami and just see what he really does in Shibuya, see what most of his feats are. And Noop, do you kind of want to start, just give us an overview of what Nanami is capable of at this point in the series?
Yeah, 100%. So Nanami at this point in the series in Shibuya is still a pretty large scale threat. Maybe not so much against the disaster curses overall as we'll see, but in the grand scheme of sorcerers, he's still grade 1. And compared to other curse users, as we see, when he goes against Haruta, he, compared to Nobara, a semi-grade 1 sorcerer at this point, who's on her way to becoming grade 1, who kind of gets mollywopped by Haruta at this point, Nanami shows her what the difference is and really what makes a grade 1 sorcerer. When Haruta literally kicks him, he literally feels like it's a stone wall. Like, he literally envisions him as just a mountain, just a mountainous rock. And Nanami literally follows up on that by literally just beating the life out of every single luck mark on his face until he has nothing left to when he ends up with Sukuna later, right? Nanami is still able to produce so much damage, and we even see that all the way back in the beginning of the series, not even in just Shibuya when he fights Mahito. Regardless of all of these things that I've said, when he gets into overtime, he's able to amplify all of these feats 10 times more and collapse an entire, what would you consider that? I was about to say a subway.
Yeah, I mean, like, just an entire like slab of like this sewer or whatever structure, and it just all collapses on Mahito, crushing him. Like, Nanami, after seeing his technique, he's kind of iffy on whether or not it can destroy him in one blow, right? He's like, yeah, if you survive this, you know, maybe we'll meet again, you know what I mean? So Nanami thinks pretty highly of that attack, we can say, with a decent assuredness there. And yeah,
none of this even takes into consideration his curse technique either. This is all just his pure attack power that he's able to dish out.
Yeah, for sure, 100%. Nanami's definitely, like, when you combine with the ratio technique, he's able to, I mean, everybody who's a JJK fan knows at this point, he's able to divide up any segment on a 7-3 scale, force a weak point, and then strike it with everything that he's got. And combined with like his curse energy enhancements, it just becomes like really easy for him to tear through people that don't have insane durability. There are upper limits or upper caps, like we see that Dagon is able to, I don't want to say casually, but he's able to block the ratio technique, and he's able to survive without his arm being blown off or any super extensive damage. But Dagon is obviously a special grade curse spirit that has a domain expansion and tons of other abilities. So Dagon isn't necessarily the norm, and we do see that like Nanami is able to break through the durability of a lot of characters or a lot of like high level sorcerers or curse spirits in the verse. So I think it's pretty clear that in the strength and physical ability department, he's pretty good. Speed wise, I think it's pretty clear that he is above the likes of Maki being someone that's pretty consistently demonstrated up to this point to being like a purely physical hand-to-hand or weapon-to-weapon combatant. Dagon assesses that Maki is the weakest one here. We see that Nanami is kind of protective of Maki in the first place. Even when they're walking up to go attack Dagon with Naobito, Nanami is like, Maki, I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't know if you should be here. Like, I don't necessarily agree with his reasons, but you may not be built for this. And Maki, while being Maki, discards that. But I do think Nanami's sort of confidence in himself, and you could say downplay, or you could just say like wariness towards Maki fighting like super high level curses in Shibuya, kind of leads to the implication that he thinks he can take Maki in a fight at this point, which I don't think anybody would really disagree with. The ratio technique, his physical stats,
absolutely not.
All of those things are very high. And one thing that I don't know if a lot of people know rather, is that Nanami, while in Shibuya, is consistently in overtime. Not only would this just maybe be a natural conclusion that people come to because it's nighttime and it's past normal working hours, but Gege also makes a statement in a chapter extra that Nanami is in overtime during his tenure in Shibuya. So all of his base feats, all of the things that we see him do at regular moments in the series, you can just amp that by the overtime binding vow that we basically get to see earlier on in the series. So Nanami is going to be functioning at 120%, really going all out here against Megumi. And Megumi, really no matter what you think about his scaling, would have a pretty tough time against the 7-3 sorcerer.
110%. And I feel like one thing that we haven't even really touched on is, especially throughout Shibuya, is Nanami's durability. Just as a human being in general, Nanami goes through multiple different fights throughout all of Shibuya and is able to keep up stamina, whether that be because of overtime, as you mentioned, or just be because he's naturally just a beast. Nanami throughout Shibuya, as you can kind of see, when he fights Dagon, he takes a lot of damage. It seems like in the domain expansion, he loses an eye, right? And then even after beating Dagon and they end up facing Jogo, he gets completely burned by Jogo. We see him wandering down the hallway with basically half of his face burned off. Either way, I think just through all of the feats that we've seen in Shibuya, his attack power, his speed, but most importantly, his durability are what really are going to give Megumi the biggest problems.
Yeah, for sure. Nanami is definitely not someone that Megumi at this point in the series can play with. And I think that goes both ways. So to take a little bit of a look at Megumi's stats, or some of his feats that he shows off. I mean, the biggest thing that goes in Megumi's favor here is his 10 Shadows Curse technique paired up with his domain expansion. Anybody knows that Megumi is not the most physical fighter in the series. He's not the strongest, he's not the fastest, nor is he the most durable. But he's able to get around a lot of those weaknesses through being extremely crafty and through having an extremely useful technique. One of the main attacking Shikigami that he uses, Divine Dog, is pretty constantly shown to be stronger and faster than him when it comes to combat. We see that Divine Dog is able to attack and scratch Hanami. Hanami being an extremely durable force in the series, even up to this point in the series, being someone that can tank attacks that Jogo couldn't even dream of surviving. We see that Divine Dog is also able to rip through the chest of the special grade Finger Bearer, which was even stronger than the first one we saw in the series. And we see, even in his fight with Awasaka with Yuji, that Divine Dog is what Megumi uses to typically escape the attacks that he himself would not normally be able to avoid. You obviously have things like Nue, which have stunning factor to them, Max Elephant, which he can just drop on an opponent and make them hold that weight, Rabbit Escape. He just has tons of variety. He can even escape into the shadows himself if he needs to. If he needs to really dip and dodge out of danger. And I mean, this is all to say this is his strength, but I mean, even when you look at his physical abilities, it seems that post his initial domain expansion, Megumi really upped what he was about. You know what I mean? He really got significantly stronger in the curse energy and physical department, because we do see that when he was fighting with Yuji against Awasaka, while he deems it to be pretty difficult pairing up with Yuji, we do see that he's able to do so, and we see that he's able to dodge and maneuver out of the way of Awasaka's attacks. Awasaka being someone fast enough to actually tag Yuji in combat. So this kind of gives me the implication that Megumi is fast enough to at least react to and avoid attacks that would be able to hit Yuji, which, if you know Yuji's physical abilities at this point in the series, you know that is pretty impressive in and of itself.
Yeah, no, 110%. I mean, Megumi, as you said before, has plenty of options at his disposal. And I really think that's what's going to give Nanami the hardest challenge. Just Nanami, kind of like Yuji, is mostly a melee-based fighter. He mostly revolves around getting in close and being able to use his ratio technique to do as much damage as possible. And while, as we were kind of talking about, Nanami does present a lot of attack power and would no doubt be able to most likely destroy a lot of the Shikigami that Megumi is able to throw out at him. As you mentioned before, because he has so many versatile options and has even been shown to be able to fuse some of these options in probably ways that we haven't already even seen or just haven't been viable in the fights that he's had before. He can use Rabbit Escape to kind of get around the ratio technique. As you mentioned before, Divine Dog is one of his fastest and most powerful Shikigami, so I really have no doubt that Nanami would even be able to go toe-to-toe, and I think that would be a really cool back and forth, but to see Nanami fighting with his little blunt sword and fighting a dog. I think that'd be an interesting matchup. But either way, it goes to show you, just me saying that, the level of power that Divine Dog is capable of and the level of back and forth it would be able to dish out.
Yeah.
So Megumi definitely, even though his Shikigami are vulnerable in this aspect, would still be able to combine them in different ways. And as you mentioned before, just his overall wit and intelligence, his battle IQ is one of his best assets in this fight. Because I mean, I'm definitely not going to say anything bad about Nanami. Nanami is also a very intelligent character, as we talked about. His analysis and being able to see that people aren't ready, like Makabe wasn't ready to be where she was at that point, is just overall just shows you his level of analysis, right? But Megumi's, as we see in almost every fight that he's in, is able to take any disadvantage that he's in and use his plenty of Shikigami to just get around them.
Yeah.
So it's not hard to imagine that also going down in a situation with Nanami to where, hey, if all else fails and I really can't get this guy and I don't want to lose any Shikigami, I've just got to trap him into a gymnasium or trap him in a building and figure this out.
Yeah, 100%. And I think a couple of other things that come into play with this is, like, I don't want to downplay Nanami at all. Like, I do want to make very clear that me and Noah both agree that if Nanami lands a ratio technique clean on any part of Megumi's body, I don't really think he's shown the durability feats to lead us to believe that he's just tanking that or even coming out of that without, like, extreme damage. Megumi tries to block that with his arm, that arm's gone, right? He doesn't get to keep it, right? So the big thing for Megumi is going to be avoiding it, and I think the big thing for Nanami is going to be landing that hit, because one hit for Nanami is going to be a huge thing, but Megumi also kind of has that in the back pocket with Divine Dog, because while Nanami is extremely durable, and I think he's more resilient than anything, I think that a couple of swipes from Divine Dog's claws would be a massive, massive problem for him, and when you combine that with the fact that Megumi should be fast enough to avoid and react to the attack, especially with the combined efforts of his Shikigami, I think you end up getting into a situation where Nanami's really in trouble. I mean, not to compare these two outright, but just to give you guys a little bit of an example of how Megumi's intelligence and craftiness and hacks can overcome physical differences, just take a look at his fight with Toji. I mean, Megumi, fresh out of a domain expansion, exhausted and breathing heavy from the Scythe, like clashing with a special grade curse, is dragged away from his friends, thrown onto the street, and is just basically thrown into a scrap with the most physical fighter in the verse up to this point, right? Toji Zenin himself pulls up with Playful Cloud ready to skewer him. And Megumi, while I don't think he was going to win that fight or he's ever really going to do extensive damage to Toji, shows that while running on empty, he was able to avoid and actually even catch Toji through sheer strategy and his technique, right? His Toji Shikigami was able to get him out of dodge. He was able to use his shadows to throw off the footing of Toji. I mean, Rabbit Escape able to give him a little bit of space to breathe. Megumi clearly is able to get around massive, massive physical gaps of strength and speed with his hacks and with his strategy. I mean, he literally plans out a way to deal with Toji and actually catch him. Like, once again, not hyping Megumi up to beating Toji or anything, but you got to keep in mind that the difference between Toji and Nanami is massive. So if Megumi can plan around Toji's abilities, what do you think he can do to Nanami, right? Especially when I think they stand on more even footing, and then you add the fact that Megumi's going to have more stamina, he's going to have more cursed energy than he did in the Toji fight. And, you know, like Noab said, worst comes to worst, Megumi brings out the domain expansion and he amps himself a ton, he gets multiple of his Shikigami, and he just jumps Nanami and forces him to take a loss. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And like, that's one thing that I really wanted to touch on before we closed out is specifically what Megumi can do in his domain expansion. I mean, we've seen him use against the Finger Bearer. He could use two different Nue. He was able to use the Gamma Shikigami to kind of trip everyone up, but he's still able to use the Shadow Clones. He's still able to use Max Elevant from the top of the domain expansion and drop it down below. Nanami versus base Megumi, not using domain expansion and just using Shikigami is a pretty, I would say, a pretty decent brawl, right? It could go, I would say it's going to be a high diff fight for both of them. I don't know if you disagree. But once you take into consideration that Megumi could possibly get Nanami in a situation where he's trapped inside a domain expansion and he has full reign of that Chimera Shadow Garden, I don't see any opportunity that Nanami has to win. Even if he lands a ratio technique, it's just a shadow. It just gloop glops to the floor and then he summons another Nue and from behind and it's game over.
Yeah, I definitely think that it would be high diff for Megumi outside of the context of a domain expansion. I lean towards him being the victor, just because I think his physical sets are enough to not be overwhelmed by Nanami, and I think his hacks are enough to make up for that difference. But I do agree with you that outside the context of a domain, it's going to be high diff to whoever it goes. But that domain expansion, even while being incomplete, is a really, really, really massive amp to Megumi's overall abilities. And this, when you account for that intelligence, it just makes it kind of hard to see Nanami coming out with a win. I think there are certain scenarios you can envision, like Megumi slips up or something and Nanami catches him off guard with a ratio technique. That's for sure possible, and I could see that happening. But if you were to ask me to put money on it, seeing those two fight in Shibuya, I'd say Megumi. And to be honest with you, like Toji seems to think so as well. This is something I haven't quite brought up yet, but before Toji actually like rips Megumi outside of Shibuya, there's a narrator statement that just says that Toji is fighting purely on instinct and is just fighting whoever he deems to be the strongest person around. And when, granted, injured Naobito, injured Maki, and injured Nanami are there, he goes for the fatigued and exhausted Megumi, right? Which, if you think that Nanami is like weakened to a greater extent than Megumi here, that's completely fine. It's kind of hard to argue one way or another because they're all suffering from some type of fatigue or damage. But just the fact that Toji was like, not you, not you, not you, Megumi, and ripped him out of the building as the strongest around kind of just lends it's additional contextual information as to like why I think Megumi probably comes out with the win at the end of the day. Whether it be the domain expansion, whether it be Divine Dog helping him out and catching Nanami off guard, whether Nanami be like have a max elephant dropped on his shoulders and then attacked by Megumi's cursed tool. I just think there are so many different ways for Megumi to come out to a win where, while it'd be difficult and while Megumi is probably going to come out on the other end extremely tired or getting out by the skin of his teeth, it would be something that I kind of lean towards Megumi taking.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you 110%. I think Megumi definitely ends up being the victor, and I want to see this fight so I can see Nanami throw hands with a dog.
Yeah, you created a pretty funny image in my mind with that one. Nanami swinging around that wrapped blade versus a dog jumping around. But yeah, thank you guys for watching up to this point. If you guys did enjoy, you know what to do. Like, comment, subscribe, do all the good stuff. Subscribe to me and No Operator, because we're going to be doing some similar versus battles on his channel. Thank you to No Op, by the way, for joining me on here.
No, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it, and I love making these. And guys, definitely feel free to subscribe to Broken Ronin, because he's the mastermind, not me. I'm just the I'm just the little hamster that runs around in the wheel.
In any case, guys, hope you guys enjoyed the video, and we'll see you in the next one.